For the longest time, modern medicine has treated your blood type as a minor administrative detail. It is usually just a letter and a plus sign printed on a medical chart to make sure hospital transfusions go smoothly. That highly practical approach started in 1901. An Austrian researcher named Karl Landsteiner figured out why giving someone a blood transfusion was basically a game of roulette, sometimes saving a life and sometimes proving instantly fatal. He solved the mystery by discovering the human blood groups A, B, AB, and O. But almost immediately after this Nobel-winning breakthrough, early biologists made a massive assumption. They looked around at the populations of Europe, saw that type A was prevalent, and decided that type A must be the original, default human blood. This framed type O as a subsequent genetic mutation, a deviation from the original European default. It was a scientific blind spot that completely hid the true origins of our ancestors. Decades later, when geneticists finally mapped out these genetic blueprints across the entire globe, the data defied that early consensus. In isolated indigenous populations of the Americas, type O frequency reaches nearly 100%. Every single person in these early samples carried the exact same genetic signature. In genetics, this is called a founder effect. The small group of original explorers who walked out of Asia and survived the freezing conditions of the Bering Land Bridge carried an overwhelming reservoir of type O genetics. They passed it down to every generation that followed. Curious, today the Asian continent still holds an absolutely massive reservoir of type O blood. But if this specific genetic marker was born in ancient Asia, why didn't it fade away? How did it survive the brutal migrations and dominate these populations so completely? This diagram breaks down the physical differences between our red blood cells. Notice how type A and B cells have these jagged molecular structures, called antigens, built like tiny roofs on their exteriors. Now look at the type O cell. It lacks those extra molecular structures, leaving a perfectly smooth surface. That smooth exterior acts as an invisible shield against malaria. When the malaria parasite infects human blood, it causes those jagged A and B cells to stick together and create deadly blockages. But the smooth type O cells refuse to clump, simply slipping past each other freely. The winter vomiting bug, or norovirus, runs into the exact same structural problem. Certain highly contagious strains of this virus need to physically latch onto the specific molecules found in type A and B blood to infect the cells of the digestive tract. Because type O blood is missing those molecules, the virus cannot attach. During massive outbreaks, clinical researchers have documented type O individuals walking right through heavy contamination zones without ever getting sick. Across thousands of years, migrating populations pushed through tropical environments, heavily populated by microscopic killers. In those conditions, this smooth cell structure provided a decisive biological advantage that ensured their survival. But natural selection operates like a strict accountant. It never hands you a biological gift without also handing you a bill. The exact same smooth cellular structure that lets type O carriers slip past malaria leaves them vulnerable to cholera. The cholera toxin binds much more easily to the type O cell membrane, causing rapid, life-threatening dehydration. We can map this biological vulnerability directly onto real-world geography. Type O blood is significantly less common in areas of India, like the Ganges Delta, where cholera has historically thrived. There are lingering everyday costs as well. A specific bacteria called H. pylori thrives in the biological landscape of a type O stomach, leading to a much higher risk of stomach ulcers. And in controlled clinical studies, mosquitoes land on and bite type O carriers nearly twice as often as type A carriers. Type O blood is a physical reflection of the specific environmental trade-offs our ancestors faced. Your blood was literally shaped by the localized threats they navigated. In 1952, a strange medical mystery tested the limits of what scientists thought they knew. A patient in Mumbai required a transfusion and tested as type O, but when doctors gave them standard type O blood, the patient's body violently rejected it. Researchers looked deeper and discovered a genetic master of disguise known as the Bombay phenotype. Standard type O blood is built on a base molecule called the H antigen. Around 5,000 years ago, a group of brilliant seafarers left the shores of what is now Taiwan. They built outrigger canoes and began a slow, deliberate expansion across the largest body of water on Earth, eventually discovering Hawaii and settling Easter Island. Modern DNA testing shows that these Polynesian voyagers carry incredibly high levels of type O blood everywhere they landed. The indigenous peoples of the Americas and the voyagers of the deep Pacific are separated by vast, seemingly impassable oceans, yet they carry the exact same ancient Asian survival blueprint. Today, modern medicine is still uncovering how this ancient inheritance affects your daily life. If you carry type O positive blood, you naturally have lower levels of certain clotting proteins. This gives you slightly thinner blood and a measurably lower risk of suffering from dangerous cardiovascular blockages. The minor trade-off is that if you get a cut, you might bleed just a little bit longer. This blood profile is an echo of an environment an ancestor had to conquer to keep your lineage alive. So the next time you look at a medical chart and see the letter O followed by a plus sign, realize you are looking at a survival medal. It proves that your ancestors stood face to face with the deadliest invisible wars in human history, survived them, and passed that endurance forward to you.